Welcome to our webinar this afternoon or this morning or in the middle of the night, I think, looking at where some of you seem to come from on the list. Welcome to this webinar. This is the next one in our Changing World of Work series. Let me just put one slide up here to remind you where you are. All right then, so just to say, as I said, welcome to this. This is the latest in our series of webinars from the Changing World of Work group at Cranfield School of Management. I can see lots of familiar faces and names in the list, which is great to see because we love it when people come back to these repeatedly. I can also see some new names, which is also fantastic to see. So welcome to this webinar today. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Emma Parry. I am the head of the Changing World of Work group at Cranfield and a professor of human resource management. You're not going to hear very much from me this afternoon. I'm very pleased to say, because I have two people with us that are going to be much more fascinating, I think, to listen to, and I'm really looking forward to that. Just to say a couple of things first. We are recording, as you will have seen. That is just so that we can share the recording on our website and also on the university's YouTube channel. So that's what will happen with that. We are active on Twitter. So if you are a Twitter person, please do tweet about the webinar using hashtag Changing World of Work. And if you want to get in touch, you can get in touch with me directly, or you can use the two handles that you can see on this slide. I'm not going to give you long introductions today because I've been giving strict instructions that these two people want to introduce themselves. However, I am, before we start, going to say congratulations to Dave Millner, who was number 16 in the HR Most Influential from HR Magazine earlier this week. So well done, Dave. Congratulations and well deserved. But with that ado, that's not why I'm pleased to see you here. I have to say, Max and Dave asked if they could come along and join this series to talk about these ideas, and I'm really delighted that they did. Most of you will probably be following their work and be familiar with their work as I have. So I'm really pleased to have Max Blumberg and Dave Millner along this afternoon to lead our webinar. And with that in mind, I'm going to pass on to them and just let them carry on. So, Dave, Max.
Thank you very much, Emma, and very good afternoon to everybody here. It's a great pleasure. I've always enjoyed the series primarily because there's such a wonderful mix of academics and practitioners alike. And what Dave and I are really looking forward to this afternoon is sharing some ideas that we've developed, indeed with some people I see who are on the session today, for a model of HR that we've been developing for a while and implementing in various organizations for a while. It's an evolving model, as you'll see. So we don't have the final answer to anything. I'm not sure that there is a final answer to the whole thing. And so without further ado, let's get into it. We would love your questions. I know there are some really great thinkers on the call today, which is why we particularly wanted to bring it to this group, because we really want some feedback on how it seems to you. So without further ado, that's me, my background primarily in computer science and psychology, and fell into HR and people analytics fairly latterly by accident, because somebody said, you know psychology and you know business, and so we would like you to come and do something at our company with statistics, and that's how this whole thing started for me. Dave?
Do you want to share the screen?
I thought I was. Is it not sharing yet?
Not that I can
try again.
Anyway, me, just to save time, I'm a corporate risk banker turned HR personnel person turned into consultant. So a bit of a long way of getting to where I am. I'm probably best known under the name of HR Curator, which is a social media handle. And because my whole career has revolved around numbers, whether it was lending money or assessing people or now in the world of psychology. I have got to been involved with people analytics for a little while, and my perspective is looking at how can we make HR practitioners more fit for purpose in the world of data. Let's get on with it, Max. Much more interesting to talk about what we want to get across.
I agree. And time is not our friend. So we might be whipping through this fast. If there's any particular interest, we would be very happy to run another session over a longer time. So we are consciously going to try and get through it fast, to try and get through the ideas in here. So the agenda and the headings that we're going to be looking at, if your executive team doesn't get what it wants, then what, ... What is this business-driven HR operating model? Why did we come up with it? And implementing it, because it's great to come up with models of things, but it's even nicer when they're implementable models. And then hopefully there'll be time for Q&A. We would love questions to come along while we're talking, so please don't feel that you need to keep them, or comments, etc. Emma has kindly offered to look out for them and to pass any on to us. So please, anything.
And I'll interrupt you with it, Max. Don't worry. No worries.
Good. Okay. So if your executive team doesn't get what it wants, it won't give you what you want. And what are we talking about here? Well, we say, what are the typical organizational outcomes that an executive team is looking for? So you'll see from the start, this reflects the consultancy nature of the work that I do rather than the academic side. I'm generally beholden to an executive team. So whether it's Swarovski or ABB or Uber, etc., it's ultimately the executive team who provides budget and financing for HR, for the operation, etc. So I'm going to put on their lenses today. So what outcomes do they typically want? Well, in a commercial organization, you'll be safe by saying return to shareholders. Some people facetiously tell me that the real reason that they're there is they want a new company jet. But really, if you're looking at triple bottom line, you may be saying, well, we're looking at improved work and working lives for people and society, which happens to be the CIPD strapline. A positive impact for the planet, sustainability. Now, I'm not naive enough to think for a second that those are the real lists for many companies. I struggle to see companies saying, well, we really want to improve the lives for our employees, and we really want to improve the positive impact on the planet. I'm a great believer in Gen Y and Gen Z, in that they are more meaning focused than Gen X and baby boomers, etc. So I'm fairly optimistic that as they start moving into senior roles, that those latter ones will start becoming important in organizations, but we've got a long way to go. So mainly total return to shareholders is probably what they look at as the reason that the company exists in many cases. So how does your executive team get what it wants? And the answer is through strategy process. And you'll look at a typical process would be establishing a vision and desired outcomes. You would then determine a set of objectives that would be required to realize those outcomes. You then look for a set of strategic capabilities to enable these objectives. So we would, for example, productivity, customer growth, innovation, quality, which is the extent to which your goods and products and services meet the needs of your customers. And then you would try and define some tactical capabilities to deliver those strategic capabilities. So you've got a nice chain there. The question is, but where do these tactical capabilities come from? So now we start narrowing down. So here you have a process-driven view of capability development in organizations. So as we said, you start off with some desired business outcomes, as I said, probably return to shareholders. Then the team will want to try and develop some strategic capabilities, and there you see the strategic capabilities. To deliver those strategic capabilities, they're going to need a set of tactical capabilities. So here you might see the business functions. So they'll need a set of tactical marketing capabilities, a set of tactical workforce capabilities, a set of tactical financial capabilities, and that list can go on to logistical capabilities, automation, data, etc., etc. You can just, I've used those three to illustrate. Now, the question is, where do those tactical capabilities come from? Tactical capabilities come from processes. So in marketing, the tactical marketing capabilities come from generating, for example, you might have a campaign management process, or you might have a brand management process. So when something goes wrong with your market brand in the market, you would then go back to say, what's the problem in the process? At the same time, you would have a set of workforce capabilities. So, and those are enabled by a set of what we would call talent processes, since primarily most of us are HR people. So your recruitment process, learning and development, succession management. So in the same spirit, if there was something wrong with your retention capability, you would then say, you know, is it the recruitment process? Is it career planning, et cetera, et cetera? And likewise, finance capabilities will come from financial processes. So you'd have tax processes, general entry processes, et cetera. And really important point is that the executive team, when they invest the corporate budget, usually an annual budgeting process, the investments are made at the level of the processes, not at the level of the tactical capabilities or the strategic capabilities. They give, let's assume HR is in charge of talent processes. You are given so much funding to set up a reward process, to set up a recruitment process. Money may come from the operation, of course, but it's at the level of processes that investments are made. So it's those processes which need to give rise to the tactical capabilities, which then give rise to the strategic capabilities, if you've got the tactical capabilities right, which give rise to the business outcomes. However, something is not going perfectly well. And I just want to illustrate this by having a look, blowing up, if you like, the human capital or the people part of that diagram. So here you see a typical set of talent processes in a largish organization. For a small organization, you might just take out some of those. It's really important to say that this is where the investments in HR are made at this level. And if the executive team has made the right investments, it'll then get some set of workforce capabilities, a specific set needed for that organization. And why does it want those workforce capabilities? Well, it needs them to contribute to the strategic capability, same as marketing and finance and logistics, etc., have to contribute to those. And why does it want those strategic capabilities? Because it needs those business outcomes that we spoke about. So there's a nice chain. For those of you who are consultants, you would want to work backwards through a chain like this. So you would go in, you would say, what is the problem? And they might say, we're having trouble with revenue generation, or they might start at level 2. They might say, we're having productivity issues. And then you'd say, okay, well, from a workforce perspective, why do you think you're having them? And they say, oh, we've got problems with leadership capability and workforce performance. And then your job is to say, well, which one of these processes is letting us down in terms of that? So then you fix, let's say, the recruitment process and the learning and development. You identify those. That in turn fixes the leadership capability and the workforce performance. That in turn fixes the productivity. That in turn gives you the revenue and return outcomes that you're looking for. So it's a nice chain that works like that. However, where is it going wrong in organizations? It's going wrong to the extent for HR, at any rate, or human capital, in that most HR projects and initiatives and activities tend to focus on developing tactical workforce capabilities rather than developing strategic capabilities or looking at them. If you are technically minded or research minded, we would say that the dependent variable in most HR functions tends to be a workforce capability like retention or absence, etc., employee experience. It's not how can we develop more productivity in the organization, or customer growth, or quality, or innovation. And that is a huge letdown for the organization, because you can't tell where things are going wrong. And let me illustrate for you. If you are aiming at workforce capabilities, then you'll never know whether you are developing the strategic capabilities you need, because you're not trying to look at those outcomes. And I'll just pause for a second to say that if you ask most HR people, or look at most journal articles, or most anything published on HR, it tends to be more about, I think you'll agree, employee experience, retention, absence, employee well-being, etc. Now, those, of course, are critical, but until you demonstrate to the executive team who are providing your budget into your processes that they are impacting the strategic capabilities of the organization, you are at risk of having your budget reduced or removed, or having human capital replaced by some other kind of capital, like automation, for example. And so what we're going to show is a operating model today, which focuses on developing strategic capabilities. So if you focus on the tactical capabilities, you won't know whether you're delivering those. And if you don't deliver the strategic capabilities, you're not going to deliver the executive team's business outcomes. And if you're not delivering those, then you should stop looking forward to further investment or budget in HR. And indeed, we are seeing this in a lot of organizations. So it was with that background that we started developing this model on the fly, I have to say, with various clients that we work with. Experimenting, so there was an element of experimentation, because we had the luxury of saying, well, we can try this here and not try it in that organization. So thank you, organizations who allowed yourselves to be control groups and experimental groups to see which structures work. And this is how we design the model. If those are the business outcomes that an average executive team is looking for, and we know that they need a set of strategic capabilities to deliver them, then the executive team said, to achieve our desired business outcomes, we will need a set of strategic capabilities that allow us to meet our customers' needs better than our competitors by offering them, and then insert the name of your company's products and services there. And then your executive team said, to obtain our strategic capabilities from a workforce perspective, as opposed to marketing, etc., finance, etc., to obtain our strategic capabilities from a workforce perspective, we will invest our limited corporate budget in an HR function in the hope that they will design a workforce with the tactical workforce capabilities needed to enable our strategic capabilities. Now, you have the set of workforce capabilities, and then HR should be saying, our HR mission is to enable a set of workforce capabilities which contribute to our company's strategic capabilities as follows. In terms of productivity, we in HR will design the smallest, most efficient workforce capable of delivering the required strategic capabilities. In terms of customers, this workforce that we design will be capable of maintaining and growing a customer base large enough to deliver our desired business outcomes. In terms of quality of what you produce, this workforce will have the capability to ensure that our goods and services meet our customers' needs. And innovation, this workforce will be capable of ensuring that our products and services are more effective than our competitors when it comes to meeting our customers' needs. So already you can see quite a different mission, vision, etc. for HR, is that we're not defining it in terms of workforce outcomes. We're defining our mission in terms of what the company, the executive team, if you like, want us to deliver. And then the question is, how do you deliver a set of workforce capabilities? Well, you've seen that, is that we will deliver, say, HR, these tactical workforce capabilities by designing and managing an appropriate set of talent processes. In other words, talent processes specifically designed to deliver the workforce capabilities which enable the strategic capabilities to drive the desired business outcomes. So you have a beautiful chain there with a different focus. Now, what does the model look like that delivers that? What is the flow? So typically, our new HR function starts out by saying, what are the strategic capabilities required to enable the business outcomes? And to do that, hopefully, they would read the business strategy, the corporate strategy, and they would be looking for strategic capability problems, so problems with productivity, innovation, customer growth, etc. That is the primary driver for HR, is strategic capabilities. Then you would say, next step, what tactical workforce capabilities do we need to deliver the strategic capabilities? And to do that, you would do some sort of modeling. Perhaps you might get some techies and some statisticians. You'd also get some consultants going out into the organization to discuss this. Of course, we'll look at that in a second, what the structure looks like. Okay, now we know what workforce capabilities are needed to drive the strategic capabilities. Next question we have to ask is, what talent processes do we need to deliver the tactical workforce capabilities? And there we would generate parameter hypotheses. Now, let me explain what that rather convoluted phrase means. What I'm saying is that, let's say you are delivering a recruitment process, designing a recruitment process. The parameters of that process would be the kinds of people that you want to get. So you might want extroverts with BSc degrees, for example. If you're designing a learning and development process, we might say it needs to deliver these competencies. The competencies are the parameters. The extroverted and BSc are the parameters of the recruitment process. So if you're global, like many of you are here, then you might have the same process in every country, but you would tweak the parameters. So in the States, we might be looking for extroverts or hygiene competencies, learning development, whereas in Asia, we might be looking for sociability, and we might be looking for technical expertise. Those would be the parameters of the process. So you would say, what processes do we need and what parameters do we need for those processes? Now, if you're being a good scientist in this process, you would then say, right, we've now hypothesized, if you like, a set of parameters. Let's get some data and test those hypotheses in the organization, much like we were testing between our clients when we tried various forms of this model to see which worked. So you would then generate data. So you might get it from your HRIS, from your business systems, survey and listening data, external data, etc. Now that you've got some data, you would build a model and you would test that data to see which of those hypotheses, those parameter hypotheses, are valid and which can be carried through. Then you would design a new talent process based on the winning parameters from the model testing that you've just done. You would then implement the new talent process throughout the organization, and you would manage the ongoing process, constantly making adjustments through a periodic look. So that is the process that you would be going through to implement this new HR to deliver the strategic capabilities. And Dave always likes to have this in, quite rightly, the governance part that you are, this is the governance of the HR function there. Now, those colors are not a coincidence, as you probably gathered. We're going to give them names. We're going to say that the sort of purple, brown, whatever color that is, we're going to say that that is a workforce capability planning function for HR. The blue is the talent process design and management function. Data, green, data management. Red is the transformation team, and blue is the governance. We debate at the moment whether the transformation team needs to be part of HR or not, and we're not particularly wed to it being in HR. It could be a group or a corporate function, because it may need to deal with change that is non-workforce related, although I think that most change does tend to be workforce related. So that would argue, I think that's going to be company dependent, in my opinion. So just to summarize what it looks like is that the central feature of HR is now this workforce capability planning function. It's no longer the process function, which is what currently is the main feature of HR, is that typically they are the people that you go to see when you want to find out about recruitment, about career development, about L&D, about reward, etc. That's today's version, and that leads to capabilities, tactical capabilities. The new focus is this workforce capability planning function, which within HR, and we're going to show you that what it looks like. The flow, to summarize what we just saw, is that your main inputs to this operating model are strategic capability requirements derived from the business strategy, and any particular strategic capability problems that you're having. These are informed by data, and your primary process is a talent process. That is your HR, your key deliverable is processes that work. By work, I mean processes that generate the right tactical workforce capabilities to enable the strategic capabilities of the company to deliver the desired business outcomes. And all that comes from your key deliverable, which is talent processes. Okay, and just before I hand over to Dave, I'm going to, because we're actually not doing badly with timing for a change. This is the structure of the new function. As I've said, there's a workforce capability planning sub-function. There's a talent process design and management sub-function. There is the data management, productization, and listening function. I'll explain what I mean by productization if it's not clear. There's the transformation function, and there is the governance piece. So let's have a look at what's in each of those. In the new HR operating model, the workforce capability planning function's role is to establish the workforce capabilities required to deliver the strategic capabilities. Their job is to elicit workforce-based business problems from the operation, from the business, and to build predictive statistical models to determine those talent process parameters that we spoke about. I just want to add there that you can, and Dave is going to cover this, but you can see the kinds of people that you're looking for there are going to be consultants who can go out into the business, maybe what we used to call business partners in a sense, and modeling experts. And we've deliberately put them into the same sub-function. It's quite important that the modeling person and the consulting person who is outward facing are in the same group. This is the group that is mostly outward facing in HR. So most of the contact is going to come through this group. We have tried matching traditional HR roles like business partner, OD, etc., etc. It doesn't work because the work is too spread out in the new model to do that. We want the OD type competencies in various places, but not in one place, as you'll see in a second. So in terms of talent process design and management, this is really what HR today does. Maybe minus the first thing I've put, which is hypothesize parameters, if only. But they are the people who design talent processes based on the confirmed parameters, etc. They are the people who manage the ongoing talent processes and the execution. The data team, their role is to maintain the quality of the data. They productize repeated talent input calculations. What I mean by productize here is that if you know that this is the type of L&D that you need for your organization, there's no sense in redoing that whole long process every time. What you would do is to take the parameters, get a programmer, shrink wrap them, and put them into a program or an app so that you can use it. So you have productized that whole process of selection, etc., which of course many companies do. So that's what we mean by productizing. And perhaps new, certainly new for most of the organizations that we work with, is that the data team are also responsible for implementing and maintaining the HRIS and the automation platforms and service requests. And I say that the reason we put that into data is normally they sit apart, which is bizarre, because if you have another function looking after your HRIS and your automation, how do you know that you're going to end up with the data that you need to support the hypotheses that the workforce capability planning team are asking for? You often end up with an HRIS that seems to be operating completely different data to the data you need to develop those wonderful talent processes which give rise to the right tactical workforce capabilities. And finally, the data team is responsible for looking after things like the organizational surveys and the listening, because we see those as primarily data driven, but I would not have a problem if somebody said that should actually sit under the talent process sub-function. I could go with that in some organizations. The transformation team, their role is, I think of them as unfreeze the freeze crowd. So their role is to communicate the new processes and make sure that they are accepted in the organization to get through the resistance to new processes, which I think most of you will have experienced and most of you will know about. They are your change and transformation team in essence. And then the governance team do what governance teams, probably the least change here is the usual overall functional leadership, project management, and prioritization of activities. And with that background, I'm now going to hand over to Dave, who will talk about how do you go about implementing this model in an organization. So over to you, Dave.
Okay, Max. And before I just start, I think it's important just to put a bit of context here, is that when personnel moved to HR in the 90s under Ulrich's model, and in fact, Dave Ulrich we've liaised with Dave Ulrich. He's given us some feedback about this model, etc., which has been, we were quite surprised how positive it was about the way that we were positioned. But I think one of the key things is that ever since, and I was a business partner for a little while in the mid 70s as a prototype within a bank, we've always talked about HR wanting to be strategic, whatever the hell that means. And we are still struggling to address that. And so that's part of the reason why, when you look at the model that Max has outlined, and there's a lot of big emphasis around strategic capabilities, the focus is about we need to design the function so that it not only aspires to being strategic, but has it set up for success. And I think that that's quite an important point. And I think the other point is that this strategic capability piece is not a once a year thing. This is an ongoing activity that could be, shifted by a new digital implementation, by employee engagement results, by whatever it is. This is where people who are working in that particular function, and I'll talk about some of the roles in a minute, they will have their finger on the pulse, and they are looking at it through a strategic lens and starting to think about, is the current HR function set up for success? And more importantly, are the talent processes set up for success? I think Max and myself are a little bit frustrated. The HR, I think, acts a bit like a service station. If there is any fuel around, you can go in, you get what you want, and then you leave again. And it's very operational, it's very client focused, it's great. But we aspire to wanting HR to be more of a power station. It's a 24/7 operation. It's got automation that's taking away some of the more routine stuff, which is really getting in the way of us having the resources and the capability to do the sorts of things that Max has outlined. Let's move to the first stage of the model then, Max, shall we? If we look at the current core HR and talent processes that are out there in a lot of organizations, there is undoubtedly, as Max said, a key element of talent process design and management and governance. And that is undoubtedly what I'm seeing, with a lot of HR functions that I've had the privilege to work with over the past rather many more years than I probably should share. There's been an opportunity where these are the things that we're very adept at. But, that's not good enough, because if the pandemic has shown us anything, it's the fact that change is very rapid and we need to be much more responsive to disruptive changes. And I believe that that's just going to carry on now. I think what we now see as the first stage of moving and implementing this type of model is to then start to look at what elements of that model are going to make the greatest impact? And our view is that this strategic focus through the workforce capability planning areas, the review of the strategic capabilities that Max talked about, and the focus on change and transformation, those are the things that probably are going to be, I would suggest, the things that you would add to your existing HR function that you've got. And then the final piece is that, there's the data management, productization and listening. Data is, we all know, is a lengthy journey to get quality, relevant and impactful information. But, there's outsourcing, there's vendor support, and that can hasten the capacity that you have. And again, that this is not just about, looking at people who are managing the data. It's also about looking at the products, looking at the solutions that have been developed in the talent process area, domain, and starting to say, can we productize that? Can we make it simpler? Can we make it more accessible? Can we also have access to this data? Because whether we like it or not, data, digital and design, 3Ds as I call it, are going to be the key agenda for HR moving forward. And we have got to be much more better positioned to address that and to focus onto that. Let me just try and give you a flavor, okay? And this literally is a flavor about what types of roles do we think would occur. So if we look at the workforce capability planning, we've got a workforce capability consultant. And so this person is the person who is doing a lot of the sorts of relationship, collaboration with leaders, with executive, understanding business changes, both long-term, medium-term, and also very short disruptive change, because we have to be better positioned to deal with it. Yes, there will be data scientists, people who will be focusing on the analysis and the creation of what-if type modeling that will enable us to understand what we can do, what's possible, and what are the sorts of things that we can learn from the data that we've got accessible. If we look at the next area, the talent process design and management, I think Max and I are of the view is that the role of business psychology, again from the pandemic, has raised itself as being an incredibly important element in terms of behavior, in terms of understanding people, and also understanding information that's available. There will be a talent process designer, somebody who's very good at designing this stuff. Just because we have talent domain knowledge does not necessarily mean that we're a very good designer. But as you can see, there will be talent domain experts, both in talent acquisition, L&D, reward, D&I, employee experience, architects, workplace architects, looking at organizational design, looking at designing the future workforce. Because this strategic focus that we've looked at is not just about strategy, it's about challenge. It's about making sure that we are positioned to question and to really make sure that the business and the leaders within that business have thought very carefully about how they want to make changes and what impact this has on organizations. I hear many times people say, we're going through our third transformation this year. And that is inevitably because they cocked it up the first time. They didn't do it properly the first time. So we've really got to be much better positioned to challenge, to have the courage to really start to say, that's not the right thing to do. And so that's why we put this emphasis on strategy and then the talent capabilities working alongside each other. This is not about silos. This is about a flow of process, which will make, we believe, a lot of things work. And then finally, the talent process execution specialist, which is, a lot of what HR managers, HR business partners do today is that they get involved in solving problems, solving issues. Well, we need to be very clear about if we are determined to make our managers people managers, then we need to make sure that they have the scope, the support, and the accessibility to information and technology to be able to do that. The data pod or the areas we will look there will probably have the sorts of people that you may have. Yes, they're sort of data geeky to an extent, but they're making sure that we've got a very clear focus about how we're looking at data, how we're using it, how we're developing solutions, and also making sure that the solutions we're developing have some longevity around it and that they are future proofed. And as Max said, we've put the survey data management in there because that a number of organizations have aligned the survey collection as a data management process. And so we've put it there, but some organizations may feel that it would be better suited in the talent process area. Then the next one is the transformation, and that focuses around the change facilitator, which is really looking about briefing and training and communication. And then the enablement specialist, somebody who's going to be there to support leaders and managers through change. We're not convinced that we've got our change method correct and that we're really providing the right support at the right time. And so, you know, we think that these enablement specialists could be really important to make sure that we get it right first time. And then finally, in the governance, you know, we've got obviously the leadership of the HR function, and we've probably got some program and project managers who are trying to pull all of this flow together to make sure that there is no gaps and that we're making sure that we're fulfilling the delivery demands that are being made of us. We've tried to put together a simple example, okay? And this, I'm not going to talk you through it, but it just tries to bring to life, for example, the Work First Capability Consultant. What's the purpose of the role? Some of the accountabilities just at a headline level. Some of the critical tasks, again, at a headline level. Some of the success measures, key capabilities, and then the knowledge and experience that's required. I think we focus very much when we've done this on what we call performance profiles. We've developed a suite of these profiles which have been developed and facilitated with clients via workshops. They're one-page max, okay? We're not after Superman and Superwoman. We are literally focusing on what are the critical things that we need to go to deliver in that role and therefore go to recruit and develop. The whole focus is around focus, impact, and value. We're very outcomes orientated, and that does not mean that we've lost the people advocacy, which obviously the HR function is really important. It's an important role, but it's really, we've got to make sure that data is the new currency, and we have got to ensure that we are aligned with what businesses require. And we've sort of assumed under all of this is that this will probably be underpinned by agile-based working practices, you know, in terms of roadmaps, planning, scrums, sprints, etc. There's been a lot of success made in a number of organizations, including Sky, who not only have saved lots of money, but have also been able to change and also facilitate that change process through involvement with leaders and managers. I think we're back to you now, Max, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, Dave. And that's a really good description of that. So just in conclusion then, because there's some really good questions that I'd prefer to get onto than to go through a lot of the stuff that we've said. It's an emerging model for sure. It's built in response to conditions that we are coming to. So again, if you want to look at it in sort of academic terms, you could say it's an inductive type model, an empirical model, rather than kind of an a priori theoretically based model. It's what we've seen going on at our clients, some of whom have hit mini crisis points, and we've said, well, why don't you reorganize the function like that? And after we've done it a couple of times, we didn't intend it to come out as a constant model, but it seemed to take the same shape every time. And we guess that was because data is becoming so important in the organization, and the executive team wanting this input from HR to be more obviously connected to the business strategy. So I think it's different from current models to the extent that this model proactively is specifically designed, if you like, to align with the business strategy rather than reactively addressing workforce capabilities on a sort of a service basis, as is so often the case today. The model focuses HR on talent process development and management. There's less about the kind of, what should we be wearing to work and the disciplinary, of course, the culture stuff. Caroline, this was your point in the questions, and I actually wanted to address that to say, where is the heart and soul? It's certainly there. It's just that the emphasis is slightly changing to make it more business-like. There's plenty of co-location, as you'll have seen. So the modeling and the implementation of the data and the HRISs are in the same team. Modeling and business analysis, that consulting, are in the same sub-function. We've co-located roles that are currently quite siloed in HR, and we find get in the way of producing great workforce capabilities in the organization. And finally, key activities like workforce planning and HRIS, etc., are now not ad hoc bolt-ons. They are part and parcel of HR as usual. So in other words, you now have a process for delivering and implementing things like HRIS, etc. So it's very process-driven to that extent. It's not necessarily suitable for all environments. It's definitely emerging. It's not will need to. It is emerging as technologies and techniques do. Recognizing the uniqueness of the environment, we've tried to avoid over-specifying techniques and roles. But Dave, I have to say, has put together an amazing set for a specific client, which looked pretty generalizable to me, but time will tell. So we would say, think of the model more as a provocation than, set in stone and saying, this is the way you need to do HR from here on out. And that's where we leave it. So I'd say thank you very much for that. And Emma, back to you if you want to do questions or whatever suits.
Wow, thank you so much. So much there. I'm just going to have to try and avoid just taking over the question time myself. That's fascinating. Thank you so much, both of you. You will have probably noticed that there are quite a few questions coming up in the chat. So I am going to try and
oh, yes.
And actually on my WhatsApp as well, which is a new experience for one of these. So that's fantastic. It's nice to see that people are so engaged. So thank you so much. One question that's come up a couple of times, which let me just throw that in to start with, is where people analytics is in this. So Alessandro says you don't mention people analytics. Is it just a different name, perhaps across workforce capability and planning and data management? Now you're just getting, I can't read if you're moving things around.
Sorry, I see. Sorry, I was just going to go to the model.
The beauties of technology, but you got the message.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't.
Question off the screen.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, or do you feel like it's something different, I guess is the question. And somebody by WhatsApp has also asked me a question about how people analytics fits. So.
Well, it's already the reason I was sharing the screen, and now that I know you need me not to be sharing.
You can share it now. It was just it threw everything into somewhere else.
Now I get how it works. So that is a typical question I would expect from our good friend Alessandro. And Alessandro, delighted that you made it. So here's a funny story. This model, I'm just trying to think which is the best slide to explain it. Probably this one.
Yeah.
This model started out as a people analytics model. It was called Deeper OM, Digital Era People Analytics Model. It was only after people like Alec Levinson and a few people looked at it and said, wait a moment, isn't this just about covering what HR should be doing as a whole? And we said, what do you mean? He said, well, shouldn't HR be underpinned by people analytics? And so the answer is that this is a people analytics driven HR function. We call it, there's a huge debate going on whether we should call it a business driven HR function or an analytics driven HR function. So Alessandro, you're welcome to open your mic and answer this. But would you have asked the question if we'd called it business driven or analytics driven? Would that have changed your opinion? So there's people analytics going on all the time. In fact, I think a better slide to illustrate it is probably the previous one, because what is this here if it's not the scientific method? I mean, that's what we're doing, is generate hypothesis, come up with a business problem. So that's your strategic capability and the tactical capability. So that's the research question. Then generate some hypotheses, gather some data, put them into a model, which is, going to be a GLM, statistical regression, AI, whatever your poison, test the hypotheses, and then implement the hypotheses in the organization. So the whole thing is a giant people analytics model. And in fact, HR now fits into that, around that. And we believe that HR needs to be more, if you like, people analytics oriented. That's the answer to that one.
And Rod,
David, if you want to add anything.
No, and Rod, the slides will be available to share. So Emma will be able to share them with you. So yes.
Yeah, a couple of other people have asked me that. So thank you. I will circulate those. Okay, there's a couple of people asking questions, I guess, about more dynamic or disruptive context and how the model works there. So, for example, how would you see your model being informed of and responsive to evolving strategic developments which require dynamic responses rather than a formalized strategy development process? And I think related to that is Jose's question that asks about how you might include shifts and transfer of capabilities in work and disruption. So the idea that something more dynamic or disruptive is
yeah. I mean, that's a great question. So the response to that is that is typically how HR operates today. Is in putting out fire mode. We're not saying stop the putting out fire mode. You should maybe think of the model as what HR does today plus. So we are adding the workforce capability planning to link it to the business strategy more directly. The talent process team is very much still, and Caroline, this is the answer to your question as well, by the way, where is the heart and engagement? All those processes are still going on. We're not taking away the engagement is a capability, by the way. It's not a process because you can't change engagement tomorrow, can you? It's an outcome. If you want to change engagement, for example, you would need to change maybe your recruitment, your career planning, etc., and hope that those processes do that. So the answer is that when there's a crisis or a sudden change, it just means that the workforce capability team are out there with the business leaders, or with the business rather, finding out what the problem is, bringing that in, and you may well find that you forego that whole long scientific method process and you do it. But in principle, you're still listening to the business. You're saying, what is the deficit in strategic capability caused by the crisis? So when COVID hits, what is the strategic capabilities that we are being hit with COVID? Well, certainly productivity is now an issue. You may find that quality is an issue, and customer growth may be an issue because you don't have your salespeople or your business development teams doing what they should. So from a productivity perspective, and maybe it'll be easier to illustrate this actually here using the value profiler, is to say, so if you are in COVID mode here, so you find here that on the right-hand side, you're having some sort of business issues. So maybe your profits are down. You narrow it down and work out that the issue that COVID is causing your organization is that it's really hitting your productivity hard. So now you go back and you say, right, which of our tactical, so this is now, sorry, the workforce capability planning team are doing what I'm describing here. So I am the consultant working within the capability team. So I've worked out that productivity is the issue. Now I run out into the organization and I speak to the managers and the leaders, and I say, where are we having a problem? Is the COVID hitting our leadership capability, our structural capability, talent management? And the answer is that it's probably hitting our structural capability in terms of where our people are and how we are glued together as an organization. Right, now that I know I'm roughly looking at strategic capability, that is the workforce capability I have to. What processes are we going to change? So now I go off to the blue team, the talent team, and I say, folks, which of these processes here can we quickly adjust to rapidly respond to COVID? And I'm guessing that it's going to be our structure and job design process. So this is why it's so important to have a process around things like structure and job design, and not to be an ad hoc thing that we do once every 2 years. If you're lucky, it's a process that every 6 months, leaders from the following functions will meet and they will review job design and structures, etc. And you might say, we're having a problem getting hold of people now in the COVID. The skills that we're looking for are missing. And so what we're looking for here is we need to change our career development process. So the theory is if we change our structure and job design to accommodate working from home and remote working and career development, hopefully that is going to fix the structural capability. If all goes well, that'll fix the productivity and that will fix the profit in the minimum amount of time. So that's a real example of how you would apply the model.
And I'd just add, Max, is that what you've described as a diagnostic process that is there to do that, and again reinforces the importance end to end of the people analytics as we currently describe it, team and activity, you know, in terms of using data. And the only thing I would just add to what Max has said is that that workforce capability team will probably very likely, as a result of what's happened in the last 15 months, be working on scenario planning as a way of starting to also shape upwards some of the executives' thinking about organizational structure, capabilities for the future. So we're truly trying to be more strategic because we've got the people to do it, we've got the process and the method in place to do it. And I think that's the sort of the glue that pulls it together from our perspective.
Dave, let me just quickly add to that. The sticking point where most people conceptually, because it takes a while to conceptually grab this model, if you like. I'm just thinking back to Alessandro's question, which relates to what Dave just said, is that when you say, where is the people analytics function? It's like when people say, where is OD in your new model? Before Dave Ulrich, for example, invented the term business partner, nobody said, where are the business partners in this model? They were a new entity. In the same way, this model doesn't have people analytics. That's the old model where we had separate people analytics and OD. We have the competencies required by people analytics. So they are in the workforce planning team, the data scientists, and we have many of the competencies required by OD spread throughout the transformation team, spread throughout the workforce capability planning team, but there's no more people analytics function. The whole thing is like a people analytics function. And, you know, there's no more OD team. The whole thing is doing what OD used to do in the old days. So it's kind of quite a change of mindset. You know, I can't say I wasn't around when Dave brought out the model, but I wasn't looking at HR in those days. And I can imagine people must have had the same shift in their head to say, we can't look at HR in that way. You know, where is the admin clock? You know, well, there's no admin clock in Dave's model, and there's no people analytics in this model, and there's no OD. The competencies are spread into different, more helpful functions for delivering that. Emma.
Brilliant. Okay, we're going to try and squeeze in a couple more. We're running out of time, but there's so many questions. One question that Rod is asking. Rod has asked a few questions, but I'm going to pick the one that I think is most pertinent. Are the strategic sourcing of ecosystem partners in these processes for talent? So Rod says, I'm from a people services organization and we have workforce teams separate from ecosystem teams, but really both are targeting strategic capabilities.
I'm not sure I 100% understand. Dave, do you want to cover that?
I think from my understanding of what Rod's saying, I would say due to the way that you're established is that there would undoubtedly, yes, there would be a link to the ecosystem partners probably in that workforce capability planning team, because that's the strategic links that you're making, and then you're implementing, I would guess, you know, particular areas or particular capabilities that are needed within process terms. So most certainly, and again, it's back to Max's point that this model is a provocation, and we really do not want this to be what unfortunately happened to Ulrich's model, which is where it was cut and pasted and everybody did it without doing any organizational design. So that would be my initial response, Rod, is I think the way you've positioned it, there would definitely be a solution or a partner team that definitely focuses on that, because that's part of your business as you've established it.
I've got what Rod is saying now. Sorry, it took me a while. I just needed to read the question myself to see that.
Sorry, well, that's my delivery, perhaps.
No, your delivery was perfect. I needed to visually kind of get my head around what he was asking. No, he's saying if you've got an existing ecosystem of partners in the business. So again, it's that exactly what we were saying now. It's very difficult to take existing roles and trying to map them onto this model, because there'll be certain competencies that the partners had that you'll need in certain roles. The closest match, for what it's worth, is partners are now consultants, and so they are deliberately reading the corporate strategy. They are speaking to the leaders. They are experts in eliciting and calculating and determining what are the strategic capabilities needed by this organization. And by the way, this model, I didn't want to go into that, this model works for a marketing function as well. And for a finance function. It's actually a generic model. So each of those functions is going to have consultants going into the business. All of them are looking for the same set of strategic capabilities, but they're asking about which different tactical capabilities. So the marketing consultant is saying, what marketing tactical capabilities do I need to deliver? What financial, etc., etc. So you probably are not putting what you currently call your business partners out of work today. You're just changing their focus to become more external facing, which they hopefully are anyway, but certainly more strategic in the business. Good question.
Excellent, thank you. And just as a last question, because it's one that I have some vested interest in, so I'm going to finish with this question. Is Lyndon asks, curious to what degree you feel current HR professional education and training in universities and colleges is changing. Dear me, I apologise, Lyndon, for my delivery there. To what degree is the training changing to get professionals and students to understand that data is the new currency? I guess the subtext is it changing enough?
Yes. Cool, Lyndon, that's a good question.
Great question.
And I'm delighted that you joined us. Dave, go first.
I would personally say slowly and somewhat disparately, I would suggest. I have run a number of sub-master classes in Leeds University, in East London, Middlesex, Goldsmiths, a few where they've asked, we want to understand what people analytics is happening out there. How does it relate to what we're doing, whether it's psychology, HR, management, whatever. So I think, yes, I think it's slowly being embraced. It's a bit like, unfortunately, CIPD and a lot of organizations is that the realization that data is here to stay and it's not going anywhere is sort of starting to get into people's minds, but it has been a pretty slow take up. But I've been particularly busy in this year just delivering and talking to screens all over the world about key techniques to make HR practitioners more data informed. That's the way I would describe it, making them more data informed and trying to make sure that they do not need to be a data scientist. Leave that for the data scientists to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I'm not seeing it at all. So when I have to, every year now, when I have to lecture the master students, for example, I'm told, go back on your data, go backwards. Don't bring data into the course, you'll frighten them. So don't do that. So I think the key thing we need is reasoning skills and logic skills, like executives have, so you give a reasoning test, but I see data skills becoming fewer for some reason across the universities. And most of the universities I work with are kind of, the big ones, like London, Leeds, etc. And we are simply asked to do less of that in some instances. So
I'm certainly seeing a flow that could be adopted and could be embraced. I think it's just a matter as to the desire of universities, organizations and professional bodies to really understand what this means.
Well, I should say at that point, at risk of sounding like advertising, that our director of our new Masters in Management and Human Resource Management is actually on this webinar and has been sending me WhatsApp messages, very excited about the prospect of including more of this in that programme. So you may see a shift, at least in one institution, as a result of this webinar, potentially. So,
lovely, thank you.
So hopefully that will change. I am aware of the time and we are over time, so I am going to draw this to a close. There are lots of questions. Maybe we could do a follow-up, Dave and Max, at some point, if you would be up for that, because it sounds as though there's still lots of things to discuss here. But just Rachel is saying yes, please, in response to that comment. So I think there's definitely an appetite for that. Just to say, lots of people are saying yes, please. I can't read them all out, but I think there's definitely an appetite for that. So that would be great. Just from me to say thank you so much to you both. It's been fascinating. I feel like we could have gone for 2 hours. To say to everyone else, we will send the slides around, and also the recording will also be available both on the Changing World of Work group website and also via our YouTube channel. Or if you can't find it, then obviously you can drop me an email or a message on social media and I will find it for you. And then the last thing I have to do is just do the one plug that I do always do at the end of these sessions, which is for our next webinar. So we do try and vary the subject. So it's almost now for something almost completely different here, although obviously still around the changing world of work. Actually only in a couple of weeks, because it's quite early in November, this one on the 9th of November, we're really pleased to invite back Sarah Jackson, who some of you will recognise. She used to be the CEO of Working Families. So she is one of the most recognised, I think, experts in kind of flexible working and work-life balance. And those areas, we wanted to do something next month because of the consultation that's obviously just been launched by the government around moving to default flexibility. So a move to people, to anyone being allowed to request flexibility from the beginning of their jobs, and the consultation that's going on. So her and also my colleague, Professor Claire Keller, who's one of the Changing World of Work group, will be coming along to talk a bit about that. So if you are interested in flexibility or flexible working, or some of the issues around the things that are presented in that consultation, please do join us. And then just to say, as I always do, thank you again to Max and Dave. Thank you to you all for joining us. I really, really appreciate your participation and the questions, even though that caused me a nightmare because I had to pick which ones to ask, but thank you very much for that. And as I always say at the end of these, and looking at the headlines today, I'm going to say it with a bit more emphasis: stay safe, stay healthy, and have a good rest of the week.